Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Coaches of QT2 Systems podcast series. I'm Reem Jishi. I'm the content director for QT2, and today our featured coach is Coach Dave Zimmet. Welcome, Dave.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to getting to know your story.
All righty.
All right, so we talked a little before we went live today, and you have a pretty interesting journey, I think, in terms of how you got into endurance sports. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, like we talked about, I was doing, I don't think I mentioned it, but at the real beginning of it was I got heavy into mountain biking and was doing that nonstop, which kind of got me into actually racing. A buddy of mine signed me up for a solo 24-hour mountain bike race because they had a group of people going, and I didn't say no. So did that, and then kind of got hooked on endurance. And then at the same time, I kept doing the mountain biking stuff, and my wife was actually getting into triathlon. So she raced a few short distance, and then her last race was Muscle Man up in Syracuse. And I remember going to that and watching everybody scramble around and the crowds and everything. And I thought, these people are nuts, But I do remember being like, I could see myself doing this. So I kept mountain biking, ended up breaking a thumb, not mountain biking, but then I couldn't mountain bike for a bit, which led to me trying to run a marathon, which led to just more and more endurance addictions. And then we had our kid, and I stopped working to take care of her. And after a couple of years, I got real antsy and signed up for Lake Placid. It stayed in my mind to try that crazy triathlon thing. And so I signed up for that through a foundation slot. And the rest was just insanity. It was a year.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and like endurance addiction seems to be the right description here, because it's, I thought I'd mountain bike, so I signed up for a 24-hour race. Well, I thought I'd figure out how to run, so I signed up for a marathon. I thought I'd triathlon, so I signed up for an Ironman. So
yeah, it took me a while to realize that everything I got into racing, I started at the longest distance.
Yeah. So why do you think that is? Not to go deep in your inner soul here, but it's sort of jumping out at me. So.
Yeah, there's demons, just running away from them. I don't know. It was I was always interested in the marathon. But like the addiction part it didn't go well. I didn't even really train. I actually trained by throwing frisbee golf and running from, yeah.
Okay, so you got the specificity down. Right?
Yeah. Okay. I basically managed to throw out my back a few weeks before, just from all the throwing frisbee. And it was my first DNF, and it still haunts me. And I mean, it was terrible. It was a super hot day, unseasonably hot. And I was probably walking by mile 11, and like mile 18, I called my wife, you got to come and get me. And I couldn't walk for days. I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. And then it was like, I don't know, a week or two out from the marathon the next year. I was like, I got to do that again. And I finished it, but it wasn't much better.
Okay.
And, then I met a friend who could run marathons, and I learned a little bit there and kept doing it. And that kind of led to the idea of the Ironman. I think once I had like a semi-comfortable, not super fast marathon, I was like, all right, now I just need to learn how to swim, and I'm going to go do this.
Okay. So did you have experience swimming?
No, I mean, like playing in a pool,
but
yeah, no, I think I was like this close to signing up. So I went to the Y, and I just swam as far as I could. And I think it was like a combination of like, freestyle hands. And I think I was like scissor kicking. It was bad. But I made it a decent amount. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. So I signed up, and then I joined a master's swim group for the swimming, which was good because there was no way I was gonna do the 2.4 in the amount of time I had without some real help.
Yeah. All right. So tell me, like, get me timing now. What was sort of like the time of year that you decided to sign up for Lake Placid? Or
I
that you
think it
signed up?
was, I don't really remember, but it was probably winter. It was long past it closing out. That's why I did the foundation slot. And I distinctly remember, I mean, all I was doing was just exercising as much as I possibly could in the 3 disciplines. And I do remember I would get dropped off at the Y for the master's group, and I swam from like, I don't know, like 7 to 9 o'clock or something like that. And then everybody else would leave, and like the gym would be closing, and I would be putting on layers and running in the dead of winter home, which was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles, like sketchy, icy. Couple of sessions in, I hear like these 2 ladies in the thing, they're like, did you see that guy running on the road? And I was like, yeah, that was me. Like, dude, get something reflective. I was like, that's a good idea. But yeah, so I think it started in the winter because that's seared in my head, just running on ice to get home after being in the pool for hours.
Oh, yeah. And pool brought down that core body temperature.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
smart. Okay. So that was, I think, when we were talking, you said that was 2011, right? First.
The race was 2011. So
Okay. So how was the day?
it was it was a character builder.
Okay.
I had met some people in the community, and because I did chicken out, and I got super nervous before the race as it was coming up. So I jumped into Tupper Tin Man.
Yeah.
Just to try and, I had done all this work. I didn't want to like goof something up. So I jumped into the half and met a couple people in the community. And then I trained like that last month with them. And they were telling me, oh, you got to go easy on the first loop of the bike, all the classic stuff. And I remember the second climb out of town, my buddy Jim, who was a much better athlete than me, I'm going up. I think I've been conservative. And then I just see him coming up. And I was like, oh no, I totally overcooked it. Like if I'm in front of Jim, this is going to go bad. And it did, I finished the bike. And then the run was like, again, it's 2 loops. I remember going back toward, the out and back in Mirror Lake. I was coming back, and it was really close to me just not going out for that second loop. Not particularly because of my body, but probably just more because of my mind. I just wanted to go home, wanted to see my kid. It was bad. Yeah, I figured out the math. I was like, even if I got in the car right now, she'd be asleep. So I finished the race.
Okay. Well,
I had already signed up the day before, so it was like, all right, I know I'm already going back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
A lot to learn. It's a complex thing to do.
It is. So you already knew. So you signed up the day before the race for the next year. That's how it was.
Yeah, because
yeah. Okay.
Well, back then that was basically the way you did it. That was when there was there was online, but it would take a couple days. Like they gave like people participating the day before, and then all the volunteers had the day after, and then anybody else who's on premises. And then if there's anything left, it would go online. So back then it was like, you had to really stock it.
Right.
And I knew from that marathon, I was like, I would hate to do this, probably have a bad experience, and then, want to do it again a couple months later and not have the opportunity. So, yeah.
So you did it again.
Did it again, trained with all those people again. It went better. But, I fumbled around for, I think 3 years, 4 years, self-guided or like using kind of generic plans. This guy, Jim, kind of took me under his wing and, made good progress, shaved a couple hours off. and then kind of plateaued out and got frustrated. And that's when I reached out to a coach.
Okay. And so you worked with Coach Doug MacLean, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you start working with him?
I think we started working probably pretty early in the season in 2015.
Okay.
And I was still on my, every year, Lake Placid. I think I did Lake Placid like 6 or 7 years in a row. And that was kind of like the A race. So I reached out to him. I can't remember. It was probably like January. I don't even think it was January. It was probably later than that. It was probably like March or whatever, because it wasn't a ton of time before the race.
And what was it that finally said, okay, I mean, you've been doing this for a few years, you were improving. Why'd you finally say, okay, I need to work with a coach?
A large part of it was curiosity, the previous year was the first year at Lake Placid where I actually did worse than the year before. And I do remember being on the bike course, particularly down in the lowlands after the descent, and all these QT2 jerseys were flying by me. Like, what the? And then, the only time I saw a QT2 jersey, I just saw the back of it, and it stuck in my head. And I was like, I should probably check these guys out.
Okay.
And
I love that.
And Doug was doing a coaching. He was doing a week-long camp down in Ithaca, which isn't far from me. So I decided to give that a shot, and kind of found him through that and started working with him.
Okay. So you said you started working with March-ish time frame. Lake Placid is towards the end of July. So that's not a ton of time. So what do you do that was different than how you've been training?
Yeah, he did. I think it's the usual story, just got me to stop working like an idiot. And, basically he just got me to stop overtraining. And I'd say the two main things are, I stopped overtraining and I figured out race nutrition, which was something that, everybody that I trained with previously all thought they knew what they were doing. And it's like, but nothing was nearly as methodical as, what we do with the core diet stuff. So that was a huge game changer in and of itself, just getting the right amount of fuel and whatnot. But yeah, it was the two things. It was like, I remember I wrote him a couple nasty emails after like some ZR workouts early on. I was like, dude, I'm not paying for this. Like, this is anyways, he talked me off the ledge and give it some time. And sure enough, I saw a thing, it went from like, because I think I was doing more power and pace training when I was going solo. And then when we switched over to heart rate, I was skeptical of it, but it worked out really well, Yeah. And I had to slow down for a couple of weeks, and then things just kind of went off. So
yeah, it's hard when you're used to training a certain way, even though you obviously recognize that something needed to change. It's still hard to change, and to be able to trust that process. But
yeah, it takes a lot of faith and takes some patience. But I just kept remembering everybody was passing me at Lake Placid. So
all right, so that was 2016. And
that was 2015.
Sorry. So how was Lake Placid that year?
It was a lot better. I had been, like, we were talking about this earlier. I had been like hovering in like top 20 to 30 in the age group for the past few races, that was in Placid and in Cozumel. And so I actually went in injured because I did something really stupid with my leg in 2015, and had an okay race. Everything was good, but then I messed it up on the run. the injury, but I finished 11th in the age group, and I was like, oh wow, I was super happy about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, I'm coming back next year. I want to, break top 10 in the age group. That'd be amazing.
Mhm.
I had aspirations for Kona, but I figured it would be, a bit more work. And so I trained with Doug for another year, and I had a much better race, went in healthy and everything, and jumped from that 11th finish to second place in the age group and 11th overall.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, I just couldn't
Yeah.
believe it. So
Yeah.
it was an amazing experience.
So when did you know that was your finish? Like when you crossed the finish line, or did you know how well you were racing?
Well, it was weird because it was the first time that it was a very lonely race.
Mhm.
So the bike was very lonely. Like I was never around people, and I didn't know why. So it was weird. And then, well, probably on the second loop, I probably saw people for a while, but then it emptied out again. And when I got off the bike, I was running out of transition, and Doug was there that year, and he was hooping and hollering. He's like, "You're in a good spot." He didn't give me a ton of detail.
Mhm.
And then, the run course is it's the two loops. And in my experience, the first loop is always great. It's like, but it's always like, or when you're watching people, it's like, oh, and then they just, they go, something happens and you're down to like 15-minute miles. So I remember running out on the second loop, super nervous that the wheels are going to come off. And they didn't. It was the first time I really raced the full marathon, which was really nice. And as I was coming back in, kind of just before that dip at Lisa G's, I saw Doug there, and he's like, and oh no, I was like, it's bad, And so by the time I get up to him, he would, it's just before those two nasty climbs. He's like, second place was just there. And I was like, I'm in second place. And I was like, I don't care about anything. I'm not going to chase that guy down. I'm going to mail the rest of this in. It was amazing,
Yeah.
So basically from the climb from Lisa G's in, it was like, I don't believe what's happening here.
Yeah.
And finished up, and it was crazy.
Wow. That is awesome. So that second place then gets you your ticket to Kona.
Yeah, that got me into Kona.
Yeah.
It was insane. Totally surreal.
Yeah. Wow. So so you did your first Kona event in 2016?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And you came back a few more times, right?
Yeah. I've been to every Kona since. So I think I got there 4 times with Doug, and then once self-coached.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been
Pretty
a crazy ride. There would be more if it wasn't for COVID, but
yeah,
it's too bad. But
so all right, so let's transition a little bit to your coaching. Where in the process did you start coaching with QT2?
I think I started in 2018. I know I had one full season of racing, of my athletes racing, before everything got messed up. Yeah, I think it was around there, and I had been thinking about it for a little while before that.
Okay. So what made you decide to take on that, to do the next step, to become a coach?
I mean, I'd say the two things are, this is going to sound cheesy, but I was super grateful for the results that I got through this style of training. And I mean, not to be arrogant, but the people that I was training with in the community and everything just kind of kept going self-guided, and didn't, nobody else around me was making the strides that I was making. So I was very convinced of it. And again, not to be cheesy, but it's such a big time commitment for people that I was like, it would be nice if I could help people kind of skip the years of messing things up. Like, if I could have skipped 2 of the 4 years I was self-guided, that would have been great. I think it was a lot of wasted time. So I just think that there's a lot of value in getting somebody who knows how to do the thing you're trying to do, you're putting all this time into. It's a lot of work to find out you're doing it wrong. Like Placid was once a year, and just waiting to see if you got something right or if you're still off.
Technical glitch there. So I think that where we left off, you were talking about how you wanted to help people sort of save that initial learning curve and to come in and
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us do like an A race a year, especially at the longer course distance, and it's a shame to invest a year, all the time and energy, time away from loved ones, yada yada, and find out, no, I didn't figure out my nutrition, or I ran too hard again, or biked too hard. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in getting a coach. So I thought it would be nice to be able to provide that value. And then the other part is I'm pretty fascinated by like the analytical stuff in training and the different approaches, and what to tweak, what are people working on now, how to integrate some of that or all of that, what's going to be a fad. So I was constantly just diving into all sorts of training systems, and it's fascinating.
Okay. So you started coaching in 2018, and is there a type of athlete that you work with?
I'm definitely more of a long course coach. I don't think, most of my athletes will race short course in the season, but they're focused usually on the full. And then we'll sprinkle in either, sprints or Olympics, or, 1 or 2 halves. And it's usually a little bit older, 40s and up. And the people that seem to do best with me are usually a little bit too focused and a little too dedicated.
Okay.
I've had other people too, and it's always fine, but they don't usually last as long. But yeah, I'll have long course people that'll stay for a handful of years.
Okay. So do you work with people who are newer to the sport, or people who are been around for a while?
I've worked with both, but usually it's people who have been around for a while. I kind of feel like my sweet spot is not really in like here's how to do a transition, as much as like you're 80% there. I'm going to get you to like 95% or better. It's usually people with like big goals that are looking to, qualify for Kona or whatever it is. It's usually kind of more of like people who were where I was when I started. It's like, okay, we're just going to clean this up. You got to dial this back. You got to dial this up, it's usually that kind of a thing.
So then, all right. So you have an athlete that comes in that's been racing for a few years, and they come to you with the same, I've plateaued, how do I make my change? So what do you do? Like, how do you figure out how to get them from 80% to 95%?
I mean, like every answer, it's like, it depends, because it really depends on the person and what they've been doing. Cause usually the background will vary quite a bit. But generally what I'll do is, especially if they're not already like a QT2er, like I've had some QT2 veterans come over and train with me, and I'll treat that a little bit differently, but basically bring them into the system. If they weren't training by heart rate, I'll usually get them on that. Take them through like our usual tests, like FTP stuff, and when they're ready for it, do the sweat test and all of that. And then from there, like once there's that little bit of a foundation, that's usually like 2, maybe 3 months of work. Then I start kind of hitting them with some other stuff once I know that they've got some durability and they're not going to keel over or get like a lower leg injury or whatever. And, test out the systems and look for weaknesses based on different types of workouts, is this person incredibly aerobic, leaning anaerobic, and then cater their work towards that.
Yeah, that's got to be exciting then to work with that person and watch them go from 80 to 95% and see that,
It is. I've had a good run. The first guy who came to me had punched Kona once, and he was trying to get back. And I think he'd been trying to get back for a couple of years. And one of my buddies is friends with him, and when he heard I was coaching, he connected us. And he was my first guy, and we trained for, I don't even know if it was a full year, and he was doing IRONMAN Texas, and we got him back in, and it was really satisfying. But it was the same thing, he was pretty well established. He had some success, but he was training different methodologies than what we do, and I just took him through a lot of the usual stuff, and then some more custom stuff to like top off the tanks, and he had a great time. And then we raced Kona together, and he beat me.
There you go. Same age group?
Yes, same age group.
Oh,
that's when I swore
you taught him well. You taught him well. You gave him wings, and he flew. So
yeah, it's a win for me.
Serious. That's awesome. Very cool. Would you say that you have a certain coaching philosophy or approach?
Not like super unique in any way. A lot of it's just getting you through the physical, but the mental always comes into play there. It's basically just, you got to keep in mind that the person that you're dealing with is probably super excited and super invested, and the job is just to help them, guide them, even when they push back or whatever. So give some leeway. But I divide my athletes into like 2 categories. Some people are looking for guidance and exercising, and some people are training for specific goals. And so I'll handle those 2 athletes differently. If you just want to have a good experience, I'm more lenient with you. I'll get you in shape for whatever you're trying to do. But if you're like, I want Kona or whatever, then it's a different program, and there's more rigidity. And I will, I'll jump on you if your recovery ride is too hot. I will not yell at you, but I'll point it out, and I'll tell you what. And generally that's the way it is. It's generally dealing with people who are overdoing it. Like, I said a 6-minute mile. What's this 5:50? What's this 5:30? So
yeah.
But like leniency, and just remembering that we're working on something together, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah. And so along the way, anyone who's training has doubts.
Yeah.
How do you handle it when an athlete comes to you and says, I'm not sure if I can, or raises a specific concern? What's your approach to how you respond?
Yeah, that kind of is part. That's just part of the sport. Like, nobody doesn't have doubts. Everybody's got doubts. So, I've dealt with this a bit with a couple of athletes. It's like, I'm not sure. It's like, you don't need to be sure. I'm going to write you a plan. You just try your best to execute it. You don't, it's like the guy or the lady in front of you is doubting themselves, and so is the person behind you. It's just part of is part of racing, which inherently is part of training, right? So you're supposed to have doubts. You're supposed to be scared. You're supposed to be excited. There's a huge mental game aspect. We all know this when we deal with it enough. So it's just part of the sport, I get that. I get like, how do you race better? How do you push through it? And it's like, yeah, nobody's, it sucks. It's pleasant. It's unpleasant. It's part of the sport. Nobody signed up for Ironman to be like, oh, I want to do something like easy that I'll get,
Yeah.
So it's just part of it.
Yeah.
Once you realize that, like, I just try to get people to realize that and then understand, like, when you're out on race day, like, this isn't like a weakness. This isn't you. This doesn't mean anything, if you just keep pushing, like, don't think about mile 20, think about mile 4 and just kind of break it down. And there's a bunch of tips and tricks.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting people out of their, from preventing people from being their own disasters, right? It's like, it's hard, God. I mean, through training and on race day, you go through every imaginable emotion and how you bring
very
it back,
much.
right?
Very much. Yeah. I think that is something that, I think people get after they've done 1 or 2. But I do see people thinking like at some point that goes away. And I mean, I don't know what the pros, I don't know what goes through their head, but like, I think all of us age groupers, it's like, so I've been to Kona 5 times. Every time I raced, I've got doubts. Every time I race, it hurts too much at some point, like, it's just part of racing. So yeah. I think the key is to just make sure that they don't think that when that's happening on race day that there's something wrong. It's like, yes, again, the person in front of you is hurting, the person behind you is hurting. Yeah. Everybody's hurting at some point. So
yeah, I had once, I was at, one of my triathlon certifications, I was at the Olympic Training Center, and they had a psychologist that worked with the Olympic team there. And he was talking about track racing, which is just, incredibly intense. Not running, but cycling, track racing. Yeah. And they were talking about, the question is not whether it's going to hurt or how you make it not hurt. Yeah. It is going to hurt. The question is how you respond when that happens, right? And how you bring that back and know that you're able to shift your mind and your approach to get through the pain that's just going to happen, so
you just got to be ready for it. It's a weird thing because like, it's a sport where you strive, like even in training, you'll strive to hit a certain power on your bike or run a certain pace, and you'll work really hard at it and it's going to suck. It's going to hurt. And then like, when you get it, the only reward you get is it's just your next goal. Like, you don't sit around and wait for whatever 180 watts to feel easy. You keep going up, right? Like it's basically continuing to chase that uncomfortableness more so than accomplishing it and staying there.
Yeah.
So it only gets harder.
All right. So what would you say as a coach, your biggest success has been?
That's a tough one. I feel like any athlete that I have a good relationship with and get them the results that they're looking for is a success for me. So, and that's anything from, I think I've gotten through, 3 athletes to Kona, and they wanted Kona. And, that's a success. But then I've also got athletes who are just, they're not even in the Ironman world. They're just, I want to do this crazy ultra run race. And it's like, all right, what are your goals? I want to finish it. I want to enjoy it. And, if I get you to that, it's a good success too. I just want people to have a good experience with whatever they're set out to do.
That's great. All right. I think that is a really good place to end, unless there's anything else that I didn't ask you about today that you want to make sure that you share.
That's good.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Dave, for sharing your story. It's always so interesting for me to get to know our coaches better and to hear what brought you to the sport and to QT2 and all the, successes that you've had both personally and with your athletes.
All right. It was a good time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye.